Hello. Hi, everyone. So, welcome to the Productize podcast. We are doing this because we believe that this is the place for innovators, product creators, entrepreneurs, product people to come discuss ideas. And our mission is really to inspire more people to build great product experiences. My name is Andre Marquet, and I'll be your host. So, today I'll be talking with Howard Tiersky. Howard is the author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Winning Digital Customers, and Winning Digital Customers, the Antidote to Relevance. And he's also the founder of digital transformations agency From, which has won over 100 awards for user experience design. From helps companies grow revenue across digital channels and has been creating some of the best award-winning web and mobile products for shopping, banking, travel, and entertainment. In his 25-year career helping large enterprises win in the digital space, Howard has worked on projects for dozens of Fortune 1000 companies and has been named one of the top 10 digital transformation influencers by IDG. Hi, Howard. How are you?
Hey, Andre. Awesome. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. It's a pleasure. It's really great to have you on this show. We are now on our third year and have we're so lucky to have great people like you with us. So congratulations on your successful new book, Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Relevance. One thing that I'm always inspired is about the story of writing a book because it takes so much time, such a personal effort. So can you tell us a little bit about the process you went to write it?
Sure. Well, I could tell you this, I will write my next book differently. But yeah, I worked on it for a few years. Well, I guess I should say the first thing I did was spend 25 years in the industry helping large companies with digital transformation. So that was step one. And doing that really helped me see the patterns that really differentiate those companies that are successful at digital transformation from those that fail or stagnate or suboptimize their efforts. And so the opportunity to work with so many great companies and so many great people, both on my team and at our clients, really helped me kind of see some things that I thought I could put into a book. And in fact, I had been writing on many topics related to innovation, design, product development, design thinking, usability, et cetera, for many years. So I have hundreds and hundreds of articles that were out there. So I had always wanted to do a book. And at one point, someone said to me, if you just take a bunch of your articles, you could sort of put them together into a book. And I was like, oh, I like that because that sounds easy. But actually, so we spent a few months and I had someone on my team work with me on this to try to figure out, okay, well, I have articles on different topics. So how do we sort of bring them together? Long story short, what we realized was we had a lot of great information and material, models, insights, but you couldn't just bring these articles together and make them into a book. I mean, you could make a book that was like all just like, here are a bunch of articles. You see sometimes a columnist will do that or something, but to make a really great book, it was clear to me that we needed to do something much different from that. So what we really wound up doing is using all these as source materials, and what we thought was going to be a 6-month project wound up taking a couple of years off and on to really say, how do I synthesize this whole approach that my company uses to digital transformation into something that's digestible for anybody? And how do I create the right way of telling that story so that it's interesting, that it's full of a lot of anecdotes and examples, but also the kind of tools that allow somebody to actually go do it. And if someone were to go use this information and do it, what more might they need? So what that led us to do is write a very detailed book, but also create a whole big website full of supplemental materials, templates, videos, additional ebooks that expand on some of the topics. What's that?
Like a toolbox where you can go. It's a go-to place for materials, canvas, and just complementary material to the book, right?
Yes, absolutely. So in the end, we probably, it's funny, at the very end, and this book I should have had one next to me, but it's here. So here's the book.
All right.
And I mean, it's not like obscenely thick, but it is a 400-page long book. And I went to a book promotion person. We were getting ready to launch the book. And so I was talking to people who promote books and get the word out.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, do you know what the average length of a successful business book is? And I said, what? He goes, 170 pages. He goes, you've written almost 3 business books here. So he was like, maybe you should break it up into pieces. And I'm like, please, I've spent 2 years on this book. I'm not spending another year figuring out how to break it into pieces. So we launched it, and it's done very well. So, but one thing I learned was that I worked harder than necessary.
You really opened the kimono. All the secrets are in the book.
I sure tried. And where we couldn't fit the secrets in the book, we tried to put them on the website. I really tried to not hold anything back so that someone who wants to go do it themselves at their company has everything I could think of. Although I have to admit, whenever I do a live cast, and I do 2 live casts a week, I always think, oh, that should have been in the book, or that should have been in the book. But then I remember the book was already too long. So the truth of the matter is, it's a complicated topic, right? Because we talk about everything from what's changing in the world that requires digital transformation, to how do you get people on board and aligned around digital transformation, to how do you create a journey map, how do you build great products, how do you deal with organizational resistance to change. So the truth is, we cover 4 or 5 different topics in the book, each of which could probably be its own book. But there's a lot in there for sure. And I hope people tell me that they're using it, step by step as their roadmap. People have shown me books that they've highlighted, or they've got tons of Post-it notes in. And I always like to see that, because it tells me they're really using it. And that was really my goal.
Right. Like a playbook. So, one of our former speakers at Productize conference, also former Netflix VP of product, Gibson Biddle, he says that everyone has a special superpower. And I'm wondering, what's your top secret superpower, other than writing books and having team motivated? What's really in your DNA that makes you drive, makes you motivate people, makes change happen inside companies? Because it's such a challenging task, especially when you go into culture and lots of the stuff that you also cover in the book.
Yeah, it's funny. It makes me think there's a part in the book where we talk about being a digital transformation leader and all the superpowers it requires. And it's a little tongue in cheek, but we say, you have to speak multiple languages, because you have to be able to speak the language of technology and business and marketing. And you have to operate you have to super speed, and you have to be able to time travel, because you have to both think of the needs of today and the needs of the future, So obviously this is all a bit tongue in cheek, but that's one of my favorite things in the book. There's a diagram of a superhero showing all of these different things. But, if I had to speak for myself and say, what's something, I would hesitate to call myself a superhero. But I think the thing that is the most valuable skill that I've cultivated is, how do you get the best out of other people? Mm-hmm. I started out my career as a theater director. Mm-hmm. And when you're a theater director, wow, you're not on stage. When the show is over, you should be able to walk away, and it should be able to happen without you. And it's, how do you get the best out of a diverse array of people, including the people on stage, of course, but also other people, the people on backstage, the technology people. How do you, a lighting designer, a sound designer, costume designer.
Was that in New York? You started your career. Where was that?
Yeah, I went to school in New York at NYU for theater directing, and then I actually went and got a master's degree, which I probably didn't need in retrospect, but it seemed like the thing to do at the time, in the same at University of Southern California in Los Angeles. So I directed plays both in New York and in LA. Not at the largest, as I was just a kid back then, right? I was in my early 20s, and so I was doing that. But I directed professionally, but I really. While I was doing that, because of course, when you're doing that early in your profession, you're generally not making a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So most people have some other kind of job. And my other job was computer graphics work. And so I was doing 3D animation and web design, digital design.
Silicon Valley back then, or in
No,
California?
I was in LA.
You were in LA.
Yeah, when I was in LA, when I was in California, I was in LA.
Mm-hmm. So that was, I don't know, 30 years ago or something like that. So that was very early digital graphics.
I know, don't tell me.
Work, right?
Yeah.
That you were one of the pioneers on digital graphics, I don't know, back in the 90s or 80s.
Well, yeah, I put it this way. I was someone using digital graphics at a time when the real pioneers were creating, the render man for 3D animation. Right. Yeah, I love 3D animation. I used to, at the time, you couldn't really do it on a Mac or a PC very practically. you had to have like a silicon graphics workstation or something like that.
I remember those.
So I had friends that, yeah. So I had friends at Art Center in Pasadena. I didn't go there, but I knew a lot of people there. And so I could just walk into the computer lab. So you could never do this today, by the way, with security today. But back then, I would just go on the weekends.
September 11.
Yes.
Security.
And I would just go use, a $75,000 computer and a $50,000 piece of software all day in the computer lab. I loved it. But I was, that was an exciting time in computer graphics. And even this was really before the web, or before the commercial web in any case.
Right, before commercial web. So what did you learn so you're talking about directing people and motivating people, I guess, from your, they are on stage and you cannot be on stage. So that's actually, in a way it forces you to not be on stage, right? So you cannot even be on stage. You cannot go there and just do it for them. So you have to delegate a lot. You have to enforce process and rehearsal, I guess. So what's the top secret superpower that came out from those early days of computer graphics and staging?
Well, from the theater side of it, I think you have to help them find, like if you're directing someone who's a performer, you have to help them find it. You can't tell them completely the answer because they won't accept it. That's the classic thing as a director. You're never supposed to give a line reading. You're never supposed to say to the actor, do it this way. Right. Partly because it just doesn't come out you don't get a good performance on the other end of that. So figuring out how to coach people to help them find something. And I think it's the same in business. When teams effectively transform an organization, it's because they feel ownership over it. They have found a vision that they believe in, that they feel like they're a co-creator of. And I think whenever you create a show, you need the people who are doing it to feel not like they're there as executing your vision. Even though as a director, it's your job to bring the vision.
Empower teams, like Marty Kagan says all the time, right? You have to empower people. So on that topic, I mean, I've seen a video of you talking about the 3 levels and your recipe to achieve customer love. What are those 3 levels? Because I was really intrigued. I mean, you got to speak about those 3 levels, but what are the biggest challenge to accomplish them, right? Because I guess lots of companies, they read the book or they see your talk and they say, okay, I got it. So, but there's lots of big challenges that are actually preventing company to get to those 3 levels. And if you can just go through them, that'll be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, let me start by saying one of the key ideas of the book is that achieving the love of your customers is one of the most valuable things you can do in business. Most companies aren't there yet, but those that are, and we give some examples, and I've done this on my livecast as well, is the financial benefits of that are extraordinary in terms of revenue, margin, valuation of a company, growth. All the classic business metrics are very, very well correlated to companies that have a strong level of emotional investment, we call customer love, by their customers. So to your question then, well, that can sound very ephemeral, how do you make a customer love you? Well, just like in theater directing, you can't force them, but you can inspire them. And so then the question is, well, what is it that inspires love? And so in my work, recognizing the importance of this emotional customer connection for many years in my work, one of the things that my teams and I have always been trying to do is do something that might sound a little not very romantic, which is how do you reverse engineer love? How do you figure out what is it that causes people to love a brand? And we've really distilled it down to 3 key things. So let me tell you what the 3 things are. And you're right. The good news is it's conceptually simple to understand the 3 things. The bad news is it can be difficult to actually do the 3 things. But so what are the 3 things? I think of it kind of like a pyramid. At the base of the pyramid is you must meet your customers' needs very consistently in whatever domain your business is in, whether you're a plumber or a bakery or an accounting firm. Within that area,
station, right?
You must
consistently the gas station example.
Exactly.
Consistently you go to your gas station and you're happy just because gas is there, right? And that's delivering, right? And then you have a second.
Yes. So if you just meet their needs, they're probably not going to love you. We all probably have brands in our life that meet our needs, and yet we don't have a feeling toward them. But if you don't do that, it's almost impossible to get customer love. So that's a requirement, but it's not sufficient.
Right. That's
the second level. Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's like the basis of the pyramid, right? That's like the foundations.
Exactly. Yes, precisely. The second level is to occasionally or periodically exceed their needs and expectations to delight them. Create occasional delight. Go above and beyond occasionally. That's the second level. And if you do that, your brand, people are more likely to like your brand. And I'll actually tell you the third level, and then I'm going to explain briefly why. Why is it that these three levels work together? So that's the second level. And the third level is to stand for something that they care about. Have a meaning to your company beyond just we're a gas station that resonates with that customer. And if you look at the brands that people love, whether it's Apple or Disney or Harley Davidson or Nike, and I apologize, I don't know if there's certain brands in Portugal that I might not be as familiar with, but these are brands that stand for something. Ben & Jerry's, Whole Foods. And if you think about brands that maybe still do a lot for their customers, like let's say Citibank, but don't really feel like they stand for anything to most people, you don't see that level of emotional connection. So that's the third component that kind of completes the puzzle. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, why these three things? You know, and the reason is because through the research that we've done, love, which is of course an emotion, and where do emotions come from? One thing I learned from Tony Robbins, who I've worked with for years, is that emotions come from meaning. The meaning that you give to somebody or something happens, how you feel about it is associated with the meaning. So what is the meaning of these three things? If the customer knows that you want to meet their needs because that's the deal, that's business. You do something for me, I give you money. So it's no surprise to the customer that you can meet their needs. But when you do, what does it say to the customer? What's the meaning? The meaning is you understand them. The customer says, this business understands my needs because they're meeting them. They must understand them. And, people like to be understood. If you're not meeting their needs, very often customers feel like, they just don't get it. They don't understand what I need. Then the second level, occasionally delighting. Why is it what is the meaning that comes from that? Well, it says to the customer, they care about me because that's something they didn't have to do. I was going to give them my money anyway for their gas, but now they've come along and they've brought me a free cup of coffee, or they've whatever they've done for me.
Feels like a bonus.
They must care about me. What's that?
Feels like a bonus, right? Just something you.
Right. The guy ran out and said, "Oh, I see some dirt on your windshield. I'm going to clean it off for you." No other expectations, just something extra. That the meaning that we get is they care about me. So just think in your own life about people that you think really understand you and also care about you. That might start to get you to feel pretty warmly towards those people. But when you layer on the third level, which is to stand for something to stand for something that you agree with, that says they are like me. We have something in common. That's the feeling. And so if you think in your life about people who have all of those, they get you, they care about you, and you really have some important commonality, those maybe sound like people who you'd really want to be friends with or close with, someone you'd want to have, you have some emotional connection to. Yeah. And so that's it. That's the formula. And then the question is, how do you do that as a brand?
Yeah, and it sounds difficult, especially aspirational stuff at the end at this very top of the pyramid. One of the, I guess let's just maybe go into more specific examples. You are the CEO of the digital transformation agency in New York City, and what are the main customer pains that you've seen lately, and how can digital help overcome? And I think digital is maybe just part of the answer. Just taking stock of what you were saying regarding brand experience and customer experience, because how do you design that around some of the commonality pains that you have seen lately?
Sure. So we work across a lot of different industries, from online shopping to home air conditioning installation, to we're working with another company on satellite projects that relate to satellites. So as you can imagine, in some ways they're quite different. But I actually think that if you really boil it down to what are the points of pain about, usually it's really only one of two or three things.
Mm-hmm.
It's either I'm confused, I don't understand, or I'm not getting what I need. I need something and it's not available. I'm not getting it. You want to order something, it's out of stock, or you want something shipped overnight, but they don't have overnight shipping or whatever. And a variation of that would be it's too expensive, right? Either they don't have it or I can't get it because it's just not reasonably priced, right? That's the second thing. And the third is it's too slow or takes too much effort. Mm-hmm. And because of the digital leaders like Amazon or Uber or Airbnb, the expectations of how long things should take keep getting reset, right? Consumers expect things to be more and more and more efficient and take less of their time, less waiting in line, less calling on the phone, less filling out forms, all these things. And so, if you think about going for dinner, what are some of the points of pain? Well, waiting for your waiter to come over and take your order, waiting for the food, waiting for your check, all these types of things. So, while of course, a lot of what we talk about in the book, and I think is really critical, is figuring out how do you go and find all the specific things within your business. If you're a car rental company, what are the things that are confusing? What are the things that are slowing the customer down? And they exist across the whole customer journey at different points in time. So finding all of those is, of course, a key part of it. But you can expect that many of them will be around this area of convenience. And so if you look at something like Uber, one of the reasons why it's so successful is it simply takes away a lot of points of effort or pain that you would have had if you were calling a car service or hailing a taxi.
So you're actually redesigning the Avis app, which is, I guess, now ranked at number one by JD Powers in the auto industry. I remember the last time I rented a car here in Lisbon, and it was pretty much a nightmarish experience. I had to wait forever. They made me sign these paper forms, then they had to wait in this room, and this was, I don't know, 3 years ago. So this was even pre-COVID. So congratulations, changing that per se. I think it's already great. It was not Avis, it was another company. So can you tell me a little bit about what went well in this redesign of the experience? You were talking about taking some of this attrition points in the customer journey. How did you approach this client? How do you approach this journey, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, well, we've worked on many websites and apps for the Avis budget group over the years, both in the US and in Europe. And I would say our approach starts with research. It's always to understand what is the customer's journey today? What's actually happening? How do they go about deciding where to rent a car? What happens when they go through the process of actually signing up or making a reservation? What happens when they get off the airplane and need to figure out how to get to the car rental location if it's an airport? What happens when they get on the bus? What happens when they get there? Understanding each of these little slices of the journey. And first of all, what's great, what's working well, because we always want to make sure we're also acknowledging those things. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Right, and what are the areas where customers are experiencing any level of effort, pain, friction, frustration, confusion, disappointment, any of these things? And so what we often will create from that is what we call a pain map. So we created one for Avis Budget Group, and it had all kinds of things on it. And some of them weren't the things that customers even blamed the car rental company for. Is it the car rental company's fault if you get off the airplane and you can't figure out which hallway to walk down to find the car rental place? Well, no, that's the airport, right?
But it does impact, right? Yeah.
It's part of your journey, right? Exactly. And so if we can figure out how to solve that problem, is it the car rental company's fault if you thought you only needed a compact car, but then you get a call that says, hey, you're going to be driving with 2 other people and you need a mid-sized car? No, but that is still a point of pain that now, I would have to wait in line, change my car out. So now with Avis, for example, there's a whole new process where it's super easy using the app to just change the car if you realize it's not the car you want and get a different car without having to wait in line. Yeah, so things like that, right? It's if you don't know when the bus is coming,
and those
if you're at O'Hare Airport and
changing the car after you have chosen the car, it does provide delight, because it happened to me once and it was kind of a pain as well. I went to Madeira Island, which is in the middle of Atlantic. I had a girlfriend at the time. I was going cheap, so I rented like the cheap cheap car option, and the car just didn't have enough power to tackle the island's slopes, but because my dad is pretty slopey, and I had to change the car. It was quite a painful experience going back to the airport, changing the car, blah blah blah. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the whole paint. Is the paint map something a trademark to from, or is it industry canvas? Where you developed that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't trademarked it, but we talk about it. And I mean, it's a form of journey mapping. You know, there are so many
Hmm.
ways to
Right.
represent a customer journey map. I think we have our own way of doing it that might be unique, but I don't think the concept of it is necessarily unique to us. By the way, I talk about it in the book. There's examples and there's even
Hmm.
templates for pain maps that are on the password protected website that comes with the book. But the basic idea, and it comes from design thinking and other practices of saying, let's really understand, empathize with the customer, right?
Hmm.
Understand what are their challenges and problems each step of the way. And because when you understand those, I mean, look at Uber, and the taxi experience had all kinds of points of pain.
Hmm.
Couldn't find a taxi, you hold your arm out, someone else gets it. You get in the car, you have to explain to the driver where you're going. You worry, did he
Yeah.
understand you? All kinds of things. And Uber successfully eliminated a number of key points of pain to create, a much better product, a much better
Much better
experience for
product,
most
absolutely.
people.
So
And that's it. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just wondering, from working with some of those largest brands in the digital transformation process, what have you learned, right, from those cases that went well? And I guess Avis is one of those cases. And can you give me specific examples that come to mind of things that went really well, and that can be maybe takeaways for other projects, future transformational projects?
Sure. Well, to some degree, my book is an answer of what I've learned, 400 pages of what I've learned. But because so much, right?
This
And
is
I've worked with so
the
many
movie
amazing
version now.
people. Yeah, right, exactly. But I think if I were to pick one thing, maybe two. I'll pick two things that are particularly important. One of them is customer research.
Hmm.
There is just no more valuable tool. That is the way you aim product development.
Right.
And I'm constantly amazed at how under leveraged it is. So many
Absolutely.
companies that are launching products of all sorts, digital and non-digital, without the kind of rigorous customer research. Sometimes they do a little bit, like they do like a quick survey or something, but really going through a proper process, which is, not necessarily that time consuming or that expensive, but to just make sure that you understand the problem you're solving. And then you test this concept for the solution with customers to see, does this really work? Does this really solve the problem? And of course, that is something that is regularly done by some companies. But, I would say 70% of companies do some of it, and maybe
Mhm.
only 25% of companies do enough of it. It's still way underutilized. So I think that's one thing, because I've seen when that is used in the right way and the right steps are taken to understand the customer, and we describe in the book extensively ways to do that, it makes the likelihood of the product success so much greater. And,
Yeah, and
and then
this
the
is
other one, if you want,
yeah.
so good.
The other one would be what?
The other one would be being ready for resistance to change. If
Hmm.
you're looking to do something that is a substantial innovation, improvement, transformation, whatever term you use,
Hmm.
it may seem obvious to you that this is going to be better. Oh, it's going to be better for the customer, and we're going to make more money, and it's not even going to be that expensive. And like all the things are lined up, and it just seems like a no-brainer. Look out. Because the reality is, any change benefits somebody and it harms somebody. I
Hmm.
don't care what that change is. There's somebody who may be on the losing end of that change. If
Yeah.
you figure out how to
MTV is
make,
going to kill the radio star. Spotify is going to kill MTV and whatever, right? So you don't have this is
yeah,
yeah. It's one.
and,
It's
and
one
and
of
when
those
it's a
moves.
competitor,
Hmm.
it's not necessarily as big a problem, although it could be if that competitor decides to start being aggressively competitive to stop you. But within an organization, it happens too. If I
Hmm.
create a great app that allows customers to order with a click of a button,
Yeah.
what about those 5,000 people in the call center? Are
Yeah.
we still going to need
Exactly.
them? Are we not going to need all of them? It's great for the company to save the money, but what about the guy who runs those call centers? his bonus is tied to, his size of his call centers and whatnot. Is his empire within the company going to shrink? If so, even if it's absolutely the right thing for the company, he may very well, or she, go, okay, how do this is not good for me. How do yes, as much as sabotage. That's right. I see it all the time. I hate to sound paranoid, but the truth is, in corporate environments, the people who have risen to the top, it's because they're survivors and they know how to win political battles. And when you threaten them, they're going to use their skills, which sometimes are substantial, against what you're trying to transform or the transformation you're trying to make happen. You need to be ready for that, and you need to be ready for a battle.
And what kind of counterinsurgency tactics do you use to, when you are invited to a company or you're pitching a company, you're talking with someone inside the company that is your ally, is someone that wants, you guys to do something. But again, it's a very complex ecosystem. It's a very big company and lots of people involved. So how do you navigate those waters? Do you have any kind of navigational chart to avoid the sharks, avoid the saboteurs, avoid whatever waters that are tricky and treacherous, and make that boat get to harbor?
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, a lot. I'll mention a few. The first thing is to try to understand the landscape. Who are the people with power, and who really needs to be on board in order for something to be successful and approved and move forward within an organization? The second thing is don't avoid the sharks. Try to embrace the sharks, because and don't villainize anybody. Recognize that everybody is doing what they're doing for a good reason from their perspective. So try to understand, again, it's to some degree, it's design thinking all over again, right? How do we empathize and understand with all of these different individuals who may have different points of view and different value propositions relative to your, relative to this transformation? And then at least try to say, is there a path for this to be a win for this person? Because sometimes you can take your detractor and turn them into an advocate by just putting their name on the project, or just having them feel like there's a role for them, or allowing them to play a creative part of coming up with some facet of the project. So it depends. That's not a surefire solution, but I think the first round of defense is to say, who do we really need in the boat, and how can we really get them on board? And for example, we do a lot of workshops. We have a whole workshop facility in Manhattan, and a lot of big companies come there. And when they're doing major transformation projects, we'll spend 2-3 days with 30, 40, 50, 60 people, taking them through the information and having them brainstorm and ideate and plan and scenario things out. And that can be very helpful because people all of a sudden feel like they're part of the team. And now they say, it's like, when they feel ownership, they say people resist change, but they support the change that they create. So if you can make them feel like they're a co-creator in this change, not like it's being imposed upon them or it's from the outside, you have a greater likelihood of getting them to be on board. So that's the first step. And that very often can work 70% of the time. You can get a lot more people on board if you have an inclusive approach. And then once you have a sufficient majority on board, it also becomes harder for people who want to take pot shots and bring you down. I think then the next thing is to recognize who your enemies are, because sometimes there are people that you're not going to be able to get on board. And you want to be very paying attention to the subtle signals to try to, as best you can, figure out who's really on board and who may just be faking it. And then part of it is just forewarn, part of it is just vigilance to say, okay, I'm not going to kid myself. We may have even gotten the funding for the project, but you know what? Funding can be taken away. Projects get canceled all the time. You're never safe. So it's about being ever vigilant and making sure that you're mindful of who are these potential enemies and detractors, keeping people in the boat, because just because people get on board, they can also get off, and those detractors may be trying to bring them off. So it's a constant battle. And then lastly, one thing that I think helps a lot is setting the right expectations. And let me say this another way. Be careful about your vulnerabilities. And you want to create a project and an effort that is difficult for these detractors to take down. And so how do you do that? Well, having more people on board helps. But also, the easiest way to take a transformation or an innovation effort down, if you can't stop it from getting funded, if you can't stop it from getting started, is to wait until there's a problem and then say, oh, see, it's not going to work. Look at this problem that's happened. They missed the deadline. It didn't ship on time, or there's a flaw with the product that we just discovered. Because you know what? Nothing's perfect. So if I were advising the detractor, if this was not my business, but if I were in the business of advising the other side, I would say, just wait. At some point, they're going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Innovation, transformation, it's messy business. You can never do it perfectly. Just wait till they make a mistake and then magnify the mistake and act like the mistake is a good enough reason to stop the program. So one way to inoculate a program against that is to make sure everybody understands up front. It's easier to sell a program up front if you tell everyone it's going to be perfect. Give me the funding, because if you give me the money, it's going to be perfect. But if you do that, you've created a massive vulnerability, which is that as soon as you make a mistake, someone says,
very, very, very political, right? It sounds politicians do it all the time. It's like, oh, there's like this flaw in law here. We have to take it down. So, speaking a little bit about the future as well, what do you think are the biggest digital transformation trend, or maybe the single one, or the ones that you're seeing today and you'll see impacting this decade, right? The 2020s decade. Are you bullish about the impact of specific technologies like VR or blockchain or 3D printing? What are you actually excited about, really?
Yeah. Well, I am excited about all of those things. I long ago tried to make it clear to myself and the world that I was not someone who could predict the future. That has never been my strength. What I am good at is helping companies figure out how to deal with where they are right now and create platforms and strategies that are flexible and adaptable and make sense based on the possible different futures.
Right.
So I don't have any better knowledge than anybody else, but I do think to some of the technologies that you mentioned, first of all, in terms of companies, I think, it's fairly easy and obvious to see who are the companies that are leading globally in areas of digital. And the truth of the matter is that we think of legacy companies as those being in the most need of digital transformation, but Amazon goes through massive digital transformation every year. Google goes through massive digital if digital transformation is nothing more than continuing to develop new products, new customer journeys, new technologies to be even more relevant as times change, these companies are doing it faster than anybody. And so I think if we look to the companies that we expect and look at those companies, Apple, Google, Facebook, Alibaba, Samsung, these are companies that have invested majorly in these areas. They have cultures around innovation, and obviously I've not mentioned them all: Uber, Airbnb, companies like Zoom. But I think we're gonna. To me, the question is, how can we place bets in these different areas that make the most sense? And so, for example, when you talk about something like blockchain, blockchain is a very important technology. The vast majority of people don't really know what the heck it is. Something to do with Bitcoin, right, is what most people would say. And so I think we have to say this is a technology that has moved up to a technology that if you are in this space, you need to get a primer. You might want to read, for example, Shelley Palmer's new book on blockchain. If you go to Amazon and Google Shelley Palmer blockchain, he wrote a good book on it.
We're posting that one here on the chat as well.
Fantastic. So you need to understand it. And yes, you need to understand AI. Similarly, a lot of people are like, well, AI, I get that it's like really smart systems that can figure things out, but like, what are the technologies? How could I actually apply that to my world? In fact, I mentioned the workshops that we do. Sometimes we just bring people together and say, we need to educate a team of executives on a new capability like blockchain or AI or machine learning or drones or 3D printing. And it's not about saying, let's just use the new bright, shiny object, right? Oh, we have to do something with 3D printing because it's cool. It's not that. But it's rather about saying, you talked about points of pain earlier. When you do an analysis of your customers' points of pain, and by the way, it's not only customers, it can be your employees' points of pain too.
Right.
Very often, there are some that you can't solve, either because you have no technology to solve them. I mean, for example, the best car rental solution would be you don't even need a car. You just, tap your iPhone and it teleports you to where you need to go, right? That would be the best. But we can't do that, right? So there's always a level of pain solving that we're just not prepared to do. And so what companies need to do is every quarter or at least every year say, okay, technology continues to give us more and more tools at our disposal. You couldn't have done Uber 15 years ago. It would have been impossible.
Yeah.
So what if someone said, oh, to call a taxi, you just push a button in your pocket and the taxi comes and gets you? People would have been like, okay, thank you very much. Be practical, right? But now that is practical. So what we need to do is be always asking ourselves, what are these that's the value of the pain map, right? We can't solve all the pain, but we can be mindful of the pain so that then we revisit and say, hey, here's what blockchain can do. Here's what AI can do. Here's what drones can do. And maybe there's all of a sudden a point where we say, now we can solve a problem we couldn't solve before because of something, or at least we can pilot it. We can test it. We can see whether this new technology can actually solve a point of customer pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that, you need people. So how can we, stay flexible, or companies stay flexible and adaptable to this new changes, challenges, technology opportunities? So, Teresa Torres from the Product Talk, she's a product discovery coach. She talks a lot about the product trio or product trio, where you have a designer, you have an engineer, you have a manager. So in your opinion, what are the main skills, personal or professional skills or roles a digital transformation team must have to succeed? Do you,
right?
In terms of actual implementation inside a company, for scouting technology, for going through the pain points or pain map on a recurrent basis?
Yeah, sure. Again, there's like a whole map of that in my book that goes through like 16 roles or something like that. But let me mention a few.
Yeah.
First of all, sure. Well, I think to the point we've just been talking about, it's great to have product teams, but product teams are generally handed something to work on, like make a product that does this, and then they go work on the product. And of course, you want to make sure those product teams are following the principles we've just been talking about: customer research, testing, prototyping, et cetera. But there's a higher level above product teams, which is a broader digital strategy, digital transformation strategy, because sometimes it's about realizing we need a blockchain product, and no product team is going to work on that until someone says, hey, this is the sort of charter, if you will, for a product. So I think you need people doing constant or at least very regular customer research. And to me, the core of digital transformation is customer research. And so I think that would be one skill that's essential. And there are many ways to do it, but keeping that fresh.
A researcher, someone on that skill set level. Okay, yeah. So that's one role.
And then journey mapping, right? Because the journey map is meant to be the North Star vision of where the experience your company is trying to create for customers. You always need to have that vision of where are we trying to go. And that needs to be regularly refreshed, because it's a vision of the future, but the future is going to keep changing as new technologies. It's like, do you have the show The Jetsons there in Portugal?
Well,
the cartoon,
we used to have when I was a kid. I don't think it's
So it's a cartoon from the 1970s about what the future will look like. And of course, it's very funny because there's many old-fashioned things, but just made to look cool, right? Because so the point is, your customer journey map needs to be regularly refreshed with the knowledge, with new customer research. The world continues to change. Technology continues to change. So customer research supporting continuously or at least regularly updated journey map visions of where you want to go, as well as continuously updating your current journey map. If the current, in other words, the pain map, if the current journey map is, this is the experience my customer has today, if you don't change anything, your customer's experience will still change because their needs are evolving. So look at COVID. I mean, COVID is a super dramatic example where if you kept doing business in the same way, your customers' needs change dramatically because their experience changed dramatically because their needs changed. So continuously being mindful of where are we now? What's the journey now? What are the pain points now? And then what are the what's the vision of the future? And then what is the technology tool set? And also the competitive vision, because competitors tell you not only the bar that you have to exceed, as well as can give you ideas for things that would be more innovative ways of meeting customers' pain points that maybe you didn't think of, that you should either be inspired by, copy, or use as a point of further exploration to come up with an even better version. So those are some of the key roles that a transformation has to have.
And can you maybe give me an example or a recent example of a company that adapted very well or very successfully to digital, and a company that did not, in your opinion?
Sure. Well, here's an example. Let's take a look at Sports Authority and Dick's Sporting Goods. So I don't know if you have those brands everywhere, but in the U.S.,
I don't think so. But if you can
okay.
just give
Well,
us,
these were the
yeah.
two leading chains of stores for
Hmm.
sports apparel. You know, you want a football, a helmet, soccer ball, whatever, right?
Right.
Lacrosse,
Yeah. Here in
and
Europe,
they
it's
were quite
more
similar.
the Decathlon, and I think that's like the comparison here. Okay,
Yeah.
so
So when it's back to school,
yeah,
go
you
ahead.
go there, you buy your sportswear. I got it.
Right.
So
Your kid needs
what?
cleats
Yeah.
or, right. Exactly. So these were two large chains, and Sports Authority struggled and ultimately went out of business a couple years ago.
Hmm.
Whereas Dick's, during COVID alone, Dick's stock price rose, I think it was like 200%.
Wow.
And so what's the difference? Well, of course, there's always many differences, right? It's always an oversimplification to just say there was only one thing that was made a difference. Of course not. Different management, different funding structures, et cetera, different real estate plans. But I think most fundamentally, Sports Authority, though of course they had a website, did not have an outstanding customer experience
Hmm.
and digitally. They
Yeah.
did in the store, they were pretty good. There was a Sports Authority near me. They always had knowledgeable people. You could ask them about, recommend different things, but they underinvested in having an outstanding digital experience, even though they had one.
Hmm.
Whereas Dick's focused on it and made a priority. And when COVID hit, Dick's had the flexibility of their systems to make sure they already had order online, pickup in the store. So they were able to shift it to order online, pickup curbside. And they do a huge e-commerce business. That they're good at selling, if they don't have the product in the store, creating an order for you that will be sent to your home through the e-commerce platform. It's just the story of two very similar companies, but one that focused more on digital and one that didn't focus as much on digital. And now what we see is one is thriving and wildly successful, and the other is out of business. And I think Sports Authority was larger than Dick's. Like if you go back 5 years, Sports Authority, I'm pretty sure, was quite a bit larger than Dick's.
Yeah, everything is happening so fast. Also because of that, right? And also because of the CTO called COVID. So, look, I think this is great. I don't think we have any specific questions on YouTube right now, Sarah. We do. We don't. So, um, maybe we can wrap this up with asking you if you can give us or tell us where can we get in touch with you, what is the best way to get a copy of the book, and all that good stuff. Maybe the
Yeah,
website to the canvas as well, and the toolbox.
absolutely. So if you go to the website, winningdigitalcustomers.com, you have, first of all, you can get the first chapter of the book for free. Second of all, there's links to all the different places you can buy the book. We may not have all the international locations linked, but certainly it's, you can get it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And of course, it's available for Kindle and Nook and Apple Books and those types of things, as well as, of course, hardcover copies. And in addition, so that's one great place to go. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I do a live cast twice a week on LinkedIn. I also have a podcast. The podcast is called Winning Digital Customers. So if you want to look for my podcast, I interview experts in digital transformation and executives at large companies who have led digital transformations for more tips and techniques from the real world. And then I have a live cast where I go on twice a week as well to talk and expand about topics from the book. And the supplemental materials that come with the book, the URL for that's actually also at winningdigitalcustomers.com. You just need the code from the book, then that will unlock the additional materials that are available there.
All right. So you scan the code on the book or just write the code on a website and you get the extra materials.
Exactly.
Look, Howard, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. I felt that this was, an entire masterclass on digital transformation, working with clients, getting this out there. And yeah, I think this is it. That we're just sharing some of these links here on
Oh, I
on
see.
the
That's
chat.
great. Thank you.
So it will also be available on YouTube. And yes, if you're just joining us now, this is Productize Podcast. And if you enjoyed, this is going to be recorded. and later published on Apple Podcasts. Feel free to give us and recommend this to your friends and colleagues. You also have going to have some show notes and more episodes at productize.medium.com, where you can find this and many, many more. Howard, thank you so much for
Oh, thank
this
you for having me.
end of evening here in Lisbon, and I guess beginning of afternoon in New York.
Exactly. Wonderful. Have a good evening. Thank you.
You too. Have a nice day.